Welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. My name is Jasmin Field, and I am joined with my amazing co-host, Miss Michelle Benoit, in the studio. Today, we are thrilled to be with you because we're going to be talking about something that applies to all of us, and it becomes very, very personal. Michelle, I was telling you that ironically, maybe not so ironically, in preparation for this show, I could not get started for the longest time because you can't really share about spiritual warfare in your family when you are currently experiencing so much spiritual warfare in your family. And we have had so many big changes this fall that you and I have talked about. And it's amazing how much you have to be prepared for what's coming at you because the devil will get personal. Sometimes your family and friend influences will become personal too in the way that they're challenging you or not supporting you.
Sure.
And we all need God. We need the Word of God. We need that stability of God. And we need to remember our identity in Him because when things hit that close to home with family, you can become unsure about everything and you can truly lose so much that God has in store out of fear or confusion or even animosity towards how much of these changes how much of these changes you're encountering. So I think it's really interesting that we all share this battle, but it's not always talked about as much. I think sometimes this is like the one-on-one coffee date, or, you call a friend and get on the phone, or even call somebody that mentors you and you just tell them like, hey, I am in a stuck, dark, bleak place. And I hope God is here, but I'm not sensing him right now. I can't connect with him. So have you ever been in that position before? I mean, I'm sure as a former homeschooling mom, you have 4 boys. And even throughout our time on the show, you had a big scare with one of your sons, So what do you...
Too many times to illuminate.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I will share, not my story, but everyone knows Yankee Candle.
Yes.
And if you love those fall scents, you're already thinking of getting a coupon and running to the store. When he first started, everyone was laughing at him. His whole family was saying, this is stupid. He was a teenager in high school, even in college and grad school. People were like, well, this is not a business. You have to find a real career. And only one uncle far away was encouraging him. Everyone else was laughing.
Wow.
Years later, he sold the business for $500 million.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. Could everyone just shut up?
But it just goes to show, like when God has a personal word and a personal call for you.
Sure.
I think sometimes we disassociate the fact that that's going to come against some spiritual warfare in our family. Like we expect everybody to be on our side, everyone to see what we see. And it's not like that. You have to keep going back and saying, God, what is your voice? I need it to be the loudest because I have all these other people that I have relationship with looking at me in the face and saying, no, you're going to fail. Don't pursue this.
Sure.
So you need to know what God is saying to you.
Well, we have to go back to Genesis when Satan wanted to cut the root of the whole human race. He didn't wait until there was a city. He was right there trying to divide a husband and wife. So, that's where we've got to cling.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
A husband leaves his family and clings. So besides the Bible, what is the most important text for learning about warfare? It's called The Art of War. It was a paper written by a military strategist from China, Sun Tzu, and I know I'm not pronouncing that right. I looked on so many videos to hear how to pronounce his name. It was written 500 BC. Of course, the Bible predates that. But it has many strategies and plans. Many current modern military men have read this book. So number one of his points is the highest form of warfare is to outthink the enemy. Oh. That sounds familiar, like a skill we need. All warfare is based on deception.
Absolutely.
The first rule of war is to survive. The supreme art of war is to subdue an enemy without fighting. Now, you'd think a book written on war would be written by a hawk where he's going to really just go after. No, The ultimate goal is to win a conflict without engaging in direct battle. He's the one that said, know your enemy, know yourself, know your strengths, know your weaknesses. And he puts a lot of emphasis on generals understanding their troops. Mm-hmm. So this sounds a lot like homeschooling.
Oh, I do think that there's definitely some parallels in there.
Yeah.
But I love what you're saying about understanding who you're fighting.
Sure.
And understanding the wisdom needed about the proper strategy, so to speak, because there are some ways where you can be fighting back and retaliating, and you're really just tiring yourself out because you're fighting the wrong thing.
Or you're exhausting your husband and children.
Yes, yes. And, I think it's very interesting to me, Michelle, that oftentimes what we think we're fighting is not actually where the battle is.
Oh.
Like we can look on the surface level and say, this is the problem, this is the problem. And then when you hear that still small voice from God, he's saying, this has nothing to do with that. This is actually the distraction. And this is why you're not in fellowship with me, because you're praying about the wrong thing. You
Right.
think this is the problem, but it's actually much deeper than this. Did you know this was connected to something regarding your self-image? Mm-hmm. Did you know this is something connected to your own failed expectations of yourself that you can't forgive yourself for?
Sure.
There's always something that God knows that we need to know. And it really helps us when we have understanding of what we're actually fighting. And then the true question becomes, are you going to lay it down before God, or are you going to keep trying to fight it your own way that makes you feel good momentarily in the flesh, but doesn't really have any longevity in its effects?
I've read several books this summer. I'm studying something, and they were all talking about how we are fighting against symptoms.
Yes.
Never getting to the root. We may have a child who is continually disobeying, lying, and we want to, I'll just say I want to punish, punish, punish.
Yeah.
And what if it's the child needs love?
Yes.
That's okay, you broke a mirror, let's sit down and have a lollipop. No, that never occurs to us.
But sometimes we do pull too much from whatever the performance is.
Sure.
Even recently, reading about marriage in one of James Dobson's very old books, he was saying, a lot of times when we're looking at each other, we need to remember that we need to have an ongoing support network in each other. And as we have that, we need to look beyond what the person is doing. We have to think about what the decision is to love them, what that entails, and really understand that whatever we see them doing is not always the actual problem. It's just a manifestation of something else.
Absolutely. Well, Sun Tzu also said the art of war is vital to the state. It's a matter of life and death, a road to safety or ruin. It cannot be neglected. And, sometimes we think, we're at church, we're at work. That's where the battlefield is. And we come home and we close the door and we take off our coat and we can relax there for the next 8 hours, right?
I don't.
No.
When I close the door, I try to prepare for the new amount of things that are now going on in the house, because there's always things waiting. And that doesn't mean I don't want to be there.
Oh, no.
It doesn't mean that I wish things were different. It just means I need to prepare myself, because there are some things coming. And there is a difference between what goes on when you get in your car and you go to that environment versus you coming home to your family, and these are the people that you have even greater connection with. There's going to be problems there too.
Sure.
As Christian as you are, there's going to be problems there too. But who are we worshiping? What keeps us unified? Since we know the problems are on the way, does this family say, since we are being honest about the fact that we're going to have these problems, we're all broken, imperfect people, we all surround ourselves with the Word of God, with worship, and we come back together with Him at the center? Because if the focus is on, you need to perform better, you need to stop doing this, I told you I would work on this and I'm trying my best. This is all flesh performance. We can't manage our flesh.
Oh.
We can Band-Aid it. We do a good job of that.
Make it look pretty, can't we?
We can make it look so pretty. Oh my Lord, it can look gorgeous. And then later on when somebody, presses a button, it's like, oh my goodness, there is a whole volcano inside of us that just completely erupts,
Yep.
But who we worship as a family is integral.
Well,
it's integral.
It's incredible. Back to this crazy book on warfare, he said, number one is the moral law. Is most important, that the people need to be in complete accord with their ruler. Mm-hmm. And I remember learning from another homeschooling family that was also preparing to go in the mission field that they had a team.
Okay.
They call their family a team. Mm-hmm. And, each person has different jobs.
Yes.
But what are we going to indoctrinate our team into? Doctrine.
Yes.
Daily
absolutely.
Bible reading, church attendance, Bible college, Christian books, movies. I'll tell you, I've seen, unfortunately, families who don't go to church on Sunday morning because their kids are in a sports or an activity. And I'll tell you, those kids won't go to Bible college. Wow. No matter what you say, no matter how you try to induce them, because you've already taught them this is not important. The Word of God is not important. Now, sometimes we're in a job where we have to take a class, and so for a few months, it meets on Wednesday nights. We pray, and yes, that's what God wants us to do. So we skip Wednesday night service. Now there's the internet. We can watch it the next morning. But sometimes there's a temporary thing, and our kids will watch that. But if we're habitually skipping for something else, our kids are learning from that too.
But you know what? I think that this is a great topic because a lot of those parents or whoever is supporting the children in this that has the spiritual influence, they think that they're doing something good. They're thinking about team morale. They're thinking about commitment. They're thinking about staying on the team no matter what your experience is this year. We're not quitting. So they're trying to instill these values in them. And I don't think that the intention is always to put God second. However, I do think what you're saying is so right. There isn't anything wrong with it. It may be different for a lot of coaches to hear, but it may be very different for some of them to hear, hey, I just want you to know my child wants to be involved on your team. They have a lot to offer, and I think you have a lot to offer them. But I'm telling you right off the bat, Sunday mornings, they're unavailable.
I love that.
Are you still going to put them on your team?
I love that.
And it kind of sets them apart. Maybe a little bit could be, weird amongst, adolescents.
Sure.
But at the same time, I do think something is respected. And it teaches people that when you are serious about something, even the non-believers that are onlooking, they're saying they really stand for something, And if we're protecting it this much as your mom and dad, you have to trust that beyond this team, beyond this year, beyond this experience, we're trying to get you ready for your life.
Yes.
And you have to be able to say no in your life to certain bosses that want to work you every Wednesday, every Sunday.
Sure.
And like you said, there are circumstances where you have to say yes to certain things you don't like temporarily. Maybe it's a new job or, you want to be able to build the kind of relationship where you can say, hey, can you change my schedule now that you see what my work quality is? But we're not aiming for that. We're not just going to leave the door flinging open. If you pay me good money or if you're going to make my son the baseball star, I'll do whatever you want, because now we're transferring that worship.
And I think we don't realize behind good intentions can be an evil enemy. Maybe he's not so interested in having you take drugs.
Right.
But just slipping away. We've heard our pastor talk recently about that slipping away.
Yes.
I think it's in Hebrews where we just don't realize where we end up.
Yes.
It's not a hurricane.
Right.
It's this gentle slipping away.
Yeah.
That
and
can
that's
do the
thing.
most damage.
Satan's very subtle. If he wasn't, then we would always be able to know, oh my goodness, we are under attack, but he's subtle. Sometimes things can even look like this amazingly sweet deal.
Oh yeah.
Can't you have both? Do you have to be so strict about it? Look at what you're missing out on. You don't want to be that family. You don't want to be that family that everybody says, well, I thought that they were kind of on the normal end, but maybe they're not. not,
Yeah.
And we have to be careful about that because, in Genesis 2:18, just as you mentioned, Michelle, God tells us in the Bible, he is so for family. He wants families to thrive. He wants families to be plentiful, but he also wants them worshiping him. They are his design. From the moment that he looked at Adam and said, you know what? He needs someone else. Mm-hmm. That was him beginning the process of growing the first family example for us to see, hey guys, I want you together. I want you all to have this special bond together, but don't forget me. I'm the one that created this type of unit, and it doesn't work without me.
So how are we going to fight the devil? I've got a very old doctrine booklet, Satan's Program of Opposition.
Ooh.
It's by Dr. Stevens, printed in Lenox, 1987. Oh. And he says the ultimate weapon in the fight against Satan's threefold attack, and the attack is slander, maligning, and accusation, is humility. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, and he will lift you up, James 4:10. So what do we do that? Do we wear sackcloth? Do we not put on makeup so that we look really pious? No. Dr. Stevens says choosing to hear, speak, and think according to the precepts of the word.
Wow.
Casting down my thoughts, and that's a hard thing.
Oh, it's very
I've been
difficult.
struggling. I'm that many years old and still struggling with that.
Yes.
And sometimes I think it's helpful to realize, this person that's driving me nuts, this person whose face is in my mind first thing in the morning is not the enemy, number one. Number two, God's going to make something good out of this because we heard last night from Pastor Pete, God is in the midst of our trial. He's got a purpose for our trial. And then I just keep saying in my mind, no, this person's a jerk. No, could I ask God?
And that's putting it kindly.
Yeah. Could I ask God, could he show me? Jesus was on the cross and he gave us an incredible example. Father, forgive them because they know not what they do.
Right.
I've been struggling with an issue for months. And just the other morning, I felt ministered to by God, like, they're children. They're children. Okay, how would I treat children?
Wow.
With love and extra patience. So now when things go wrong, and they keep going wrong, I just say, okay, they're children.
It's amazing how...
And I pray.
Yes, one word from God.
Yes.
One encounter with God, it changes the entire course, not just of your thinking, but of your heart. And it doesn't make sense. Like sometimes you'll just have this inner resentment, and it's living in you now. I mean, it is taking occupancy in your heart now.
Yep.
And it's like the voice of God, the Spirit of God, that is the only thing that can penetrate and bring you back, to a spiritual way of thinking. We try to generate it so much. I want to be a good Christian. I don't want to say this mean thing about them. I'm going to try not to think this really rude thing about them, but then what happens? You get attacked even closer to home. Satan says, I see this face you're trying to put on. And so now I'm going to go even more personally, and I'm going to give you some problems with your son this week. Sure. I'm going to give you some problems with your marriage. I know I'm going to give you problems with both of them this week. And it's going to be right after a time maybe where you all just formed a sweet unity, a refreshing in your bond. I'm going to take it away.
Oh, sure.
And that's how he works. He looks at things where you are glorifying God with all that you have successfully, not perfectly, but successfully, meaning you are being obedient and you're hearing from him. You're actively pursuing him. It's like as soon as you start beaming, with the light of God, Satan says, oh, I have got to take that rug from under her, and
Sure.
I'm going to use everyone personal to do it.
Sure. Sun Tzu also talked about heaven. He's got 5 factors besides the moral law, heaven. And he talked about things that are beyond our control. All right? Unpredictable aspects of the battlefield. So our family needs to be prepared the best way we can, but flexible. Our children have to be taught how to handle disappointment.
Oh, absolutely.
And, just like, okay, I know I promised we were going to go and do this today, but, this happened.
Yes.
Or I know it's your birthday and we prayed for a good day so we could have the party outside, but it's raining. Okay, how can we pivot? How can we pivot? And we can't keep our children from disappointment,
Right.
but we can equip them with tools on how to handle it. Because guess what? It doesn't stop.
It doesn't. And when you're a child, still learning what it even means to have self-control. And let's not forget, mom, dad, you don't fully have it yourself. Yeah. So we need to be gracious. Sometimes we don't realize we're putting a standard so high on our kids that we can't even follow ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love this preparation about the realities of life. You're going to make a plan, which is great. You're going to have these pursuits. That's awesome. But you can't fall apart when they fall apart. It's so important. I was telling you, we just went through this in our family.
Yes.
Our entire homeschool year has changed because the school we thought we were going to go to, we are definitely not going
on
to.
On a dime, right?
Oh my gosh, Michelle.
At the worst possible time.
But you know what? When I saw it, of course, my natural response was to panic. Like hardcore panic. I am a planner and I was like, yes, we are building from here. Things are great. But after the tears, after the panic, it was like, Jasmin, if God hasn't changed, even if everything else about your fall has changed, if God hasn't changed, you can cleave to that. That has not changed at all. And remember, you're confused. God is never confused. Something's been revealed to you now. He knew the whole time and he has a plan. So now you pray, okay, God, how do I step into what you already had? Because I really thought I was going the right way.
Sure.
And sometimes I think that warfare, it's actually allowed.
Yes.
Peter talks about how these are the tests and trials of our faith,
Sure.
and they feel like fire.
And of course, we can look at the book of Job and see how much control Satan was allowed to have.
Absolutely.
Devastating.
Yes.
Control.
But as you're saying about flexibility, it makes me think about Deuteronomy 6 and how so many things are reiterated, and you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly to these commands I'm giving you today. Repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're on the road, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. Tie them to your hands and wear them on your forehead as reminders. Write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. This is something that God is continuously telling us. He's been telling us since he was speaking to the Israelites. You need my word in you every day in some form, because warfare is coming in some form. And I'm the one who helps you fight beyond it.
Beautiful. Sun Tzu also talked about the earth, and he talked about a battlefield's physical terrain, environment, dangers, open ground, landscape that could influence a strategy. And I couldn't help but think about my home. Mm-hmm. My home now is pretty clean. There are areas we're working on our cellar right now. My husband's home, putting up shelves right now as we speak to deal with some of the stuff that we want to keep. But I can't, I know when you have small children and you're busy, don't ask you to have a clean house. But it doesn't, I remember dressing out of the dryer every morning. That's where the clean clothes were. Mm-hmm. And so what?
I've done it.
There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But we need to make a plan so that this year is not the same as last year. Like last year, if you only cooked once a week, maybe this year you cook twice. Mm-hmm. Or last year, if the kitchen floor was done once a month, maybe as soon as your kid is big enough that you can... I had a telescoping vacuum that my son Jason at 4 years old could vacuum better than I could.
Wow.
And we just never pulled up that handle, and he thought it was bright blue. He thought that was his vacuum. Oh. So you can give jobs to your kids so that we maintain some kind of order. We always put homeschooling away Friday afternoon.
You know what?
In
That's
a cabinet,
great.
It was gone. The table was clear. Mm-hmm. No homework on the weekend.
Yep, absolutely.
So there are things you can control.
Right. And I think you have to keep a close eye on that because every season of your life is different.
Sure.
Maybe what was working for the last 2 years, now your kids' ages are more spread apart. So you need to individualize your prayers for them and individualize your plans for them.
Sure.
Even if it's a very big turn for you. And, sometimes we like to sit in that comfortability. I've got my plan here. This has been going so well. And then we start looking at everyone and how it's just not working the same, But I love these perspectives of, okay, what can change? What can't change? And yes, there were some things about last year that I just allowed to be accepted because we were in the crux of the school year. But I'm making a mental note, don't want to do this again on purpose the next year. So if I am getting my clothes out of the dryer regularly, how do I not do that regularly? I'm glad I know how to do that for the days when it calls for it.
Sure.
But maybe not try to do that. Like you said about the dinner, don't add, now I'm going to cook 5 times a week. I mean,
please don't do that.
Who are you trying to cook 5 times a week and keep that house clean and teach your kids?
Could we just say get off Pinterest?
Oh my gosh.
Because
I have a mixed emotion about
this. If it brings you joy, great.
Yeah.
If it uses an hour a week and helps you to relax, great. Not an hour a day. Mm-mm. But if you compare, you will despair.
Yeah.
Because I don't have that white rug.
I know.
Susie so-and-so has.
Some things I'm like, you are so daring to have that in your living room. Don't you foresee popsicle juice and chocolate milks? And
what we're comparing is our inner feelings to someone's outer expression.
Yeah.
And we don't know how they really feel.
Right.
Right. And how it really does. I love, love, love Matthew 11. Come unto me. And in the Message version, are you tired of the battle, worn out, burned out? Get away with me and recover your life.
Wow.
This is a great time to plug the women's seminar that's coming up on September 20th and 21st. Ladies, it's not too late to register, even up till the Wednesday before. You can grab the lunch. Plan. You don't tell me you're too busy. I'm too busy.
Yep.
But plan to make this a day where you unplug.
Right.
Where you tell your husband, okay, the kids are eating McDonald's Friday night because I'm not going to be here. Mm-hmm. And then you go.
Yes.
And spend time with women.
Yes.
Absolutely. And in the Message, it says, learn the unforced rhythms of grace.
I love that. I love that, Michelle, because we get so used to attaching busyness to purpose, and I was even I listened to a podcast called Little by Little Homeschool. Her name is Lee Nguyen. She's just graduated 2 of her kids from homeschool. And now she's started a podcast just sharing everything about what you should value over curriculum to ways you can actually keep your house clean more often. And she was saying, it's so, so, so very important to remember that as you are walking through these different seasons, you have to remember that God needs to be present in each of them, and he will look different in all of them. And you can stand back and say, okay, God, if you're giving me this responsibility, whether you homeschool or not, maybe you're trying to figure out how to strengthen your bond with your kids. As soon as you get home from work, you only have 3 hours before they go to bed. And you're saying, how can I remain personal? It's okay to step back and say, how can I pour in? And because I'm going to be pouring in so much to my kids, how do I get refilled?
Yes.
And look and seek these things, for you and your husband, take friends up on their offers sometimes to watch your kids for a couple of hours, go to the women's seminar, protect a little 15-minute time period where maybe you would have done the load of laundry, but instead you said, hey guys, why don't you watch an episode of something, and you grab your devotional and your coffee because that's really what you need. The laundry will get done. Everything else will get done.
I love that.
But when we have that little bit of spiritual ammunition, so to speak, it prepares us for the next phone call or the next change in plans. And God is teaching us how to just keep moving with him. He is that consistency. The plans are not, even if they're awesome plans. Yep. Sometimes they're awesome. Yep. And God says, yeah, but are you willing to let them go? Are you holding onto them loosely, or are your nails digging into them? And no matter what I'm trying to tell you, you're saying, no, God, I'm directing you now because this plan is too great to pass up.
I love it.
And we need to keep growing as mothers and as women.
Yeah.
God, what are you saying now? Yeah. What are you saying to me here?
So the enemy wants to keep us away from doctrine. Mm-hmm. Number one, doubt it, despair over it. Mm-hmm. He did it with Eve. The first thing he attacked, has God really said? And then the things we can't control, that we are depressed and upset, or the things we can control where we get crazy and legalistic and we're screaming at our kids because their shoes aren't in the pretty new tray we just got from Home Goods. It's like, oh my gosh. So we're back and forth. But in this same crazy book, The Art of War, he talks about the commander. The commander has perspective, and he needs to represent wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness. So, our kids are looking to us.
Oh, absolutely.
Can you apologize? I apologize now more to our 26-year-old who still lives with us.
Oh.
But, can you apologize? Can you say, oh my gosh, Mommy just screamed, or, oh my gosh, Mommy forgot about your need. Oh my gosh, there are no clean sheets tonight. We're going to have blankets. You know? Can you relax and let your kids see you? My dad would never apologize. Never, until he got saved.
Oh.
So if you're saved and you're living out this Christian life, that's part of that humility.
Yeah.
But they need to know that you have perspective.
Yes.
And we just had our 11-year-old grandson with us for 2 out of 3 weeks. We had so much fun, but it was a continual setting. Yes, you're here, it's vacation, but I'm in charge.
Yep. Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I'm a big believer in giving kids a lot so you can take a lot away.
Oh.
A big allowance that you just forfeited, my dear.
Oh.
But Satan is in the details
Absolutely.
of this. And he wants you to not be in charge. He's happier if you're trying to be their friend and build a relationship. Okay, forget it.
We've already had that talk.
It doesn't work.
Mommy's in her own category. Okay.
When they're 30, they will need you as their friend. They do not need you now. Doesn't mean we don't have a very close, loving relationship.
Right.
But when the rubber hits the road, no, you're not. I have had my husband tell my sons, you're not in this marriage. Do not disrespect my wife. And nothing set those boys back on their heels than hearing their dad talk these small, simple sentences. You can have a voice. We'll listen. We'll have a family meeting, but the final decision is ours.
Absolutely. And that is God's order. That is God's design,
It is.
But I really think that what you're saying is important, Michelle, because part of the reason why spiritual warfare in the family is so prevalent, in addition to us trying to model what God wants, is that we all have connection to these different family roots.
Yes.
So my husband and myself could have seen the way arguments were dealt with very differently. We could have seen the solutions to problems sorted out very differently. And we could have had very different dynamics between our own parental relationships. So while my husband or myself is trying to uphold one principle, the opposite can be going on with the other parent. And then there's this friction because we have in common that we want to raise these kids the best way possible.
Sure.
But we have pasts that are following us. We have baggage, and then we also have our own brokenness. Yeah. So coming up with a family culture that we both agree with, like sitting down and saying, what is the vision for our family? And this actually helped me to let go of the big devastation that we just experienced with our change in our homeschool year. We sat down and we said, listen, we made a choice that we are not going to go into debt purposely regarding our kids' education. There are so many resources out there, so many people in our lives, and God has equipped us as teachers to pour into them. And so there's a way to do it without the additional stress of this costing way too much. So we're not going to value that over whether or not the quality of time and the quality of what we can offer should be questioned. We're available. God has called us to this, so we can just let go of what we thought was going to be. It has changed now. People change their mind, out of our control. What is in my control? Whether or not I still push myself into that plan because it looks so beautiful. Or if I say, all right, I'm going to step back and say, what did we decide as a family? This is more important than this. Let's look at what our gains are. Hey, listen, if we don't do this, we have more flexibility here. Maybe you can be more involved here, or I can support you in this thing you've been trying to accomplish for the last year. Maybe there are some wonderful things we're not looking at where God is actually saying, you have prayed about the values in your family. And now I want you to see the doors I'm opening for you to walk through. It's going to look different than you thought, but let it be scary as you walk towards me, and you will receive the clarity that you need.
I'm just going to speak to grandparents right now. Will you let your kids have their own family?
Oh.
You had your chance. You did your best. It turned out a certain way. And if you want your kids to come every single Thanksgiving, which I do, it's okay if they say to me, you know what, it's going to be stressful for us to do it this year. We'll see you next year. Release your kids from any bondage. I like what you said. Let them determine their own family culture. There may be some family traditions they adore. There may be some they abhor.
Yeah.
And let them be them.
But isn't that hard, Michelle? Because I'm guessing, I'm not in this place yet, but I'm guessing as, I don't know if you're Nana Michelle or Grammy.
I'm Grandma Honey.
Grandma Honey. Oh my gosh, how sweet. And you are so sweet.
Oh, thank you.
If Grandma Honey is looking at pictures of her kids and she's reminiscing and she's saying, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad they're all going to be surrounding me in just 3 short months. There is so much.
Not.
But
no.
I think you have to get to that point because that's hard for some people.
You have to be flexible as the head of your family. Let them, and maybe they won't come this year and they'll say, wow, that stunk. We're going to make sure we always come from now on.
Yeah.
Let them bump their head on the rocks that you've already bumped your head on.
But do you think that can easily turn into additional spiritual warfare when you are keeping your hands on those picture frames saying, hey, listen, this has been my vision for Thanksgiving.
No.
My first grandchild
I don't talk that way. When my firstborn was born, when he was 1, I already knew he was going to leave.
Okay.
And that we had to be more of a support and not so much a spider web.
A spider web.
To be the thing under the rocket that pushes him off. And unfortunately, off means away. No, my kids, whatever they want to do is fine with me. And like I just said, we just had 3 weeks with one of my grandsons.
Yeah.
So look for alternatives.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's just relax. All right? Let's let our families breathe, please, because there's the enemy going to get in.
Yes.
Oh, they're not like coming. They don't love you.
Right.
He's going to be there whispering. It's so much fun to tell Satan to shut up. We've learned that from Pastor Shabeli. The final point that Sun Tzu made was discipline, that there's an organization, a structure, and he talks about being in control of military spending.
Okay.
And this is a way where Satan can get in because you think your child needs those $100 kicks to be accepted, or he needs this $300 program. Homeschooling. I've seen some of them. They're so beautiful.
Yeah, they're great, but they're not always God's plan for your family.
Yep. And I remember, what are some signals to recognize Satan? For me, it's confusion. When there's confusion at the home, when everyone's talking, when we're fighting, it's like, wait a minute, stop. Could we all just retreat to our corners, take a breath, take a glass of water, and let's come back in an hour. There will be ice cream. Let's figure this out.
Oh, yes. Got to put something in there.
Bad dreams. It's one thing when your child has a bad dream, but I've had 2 of my sons had incessant bad dreams, and it was like, okay, this is not them. This is the enemy.
Sure.
But I didn't go to them and say, oh, I think Satan is bothering you. No. I opened my Bible. I got an index card. I don't know if they make such things anymore.
They do. I have some.
I would sit with them, show them the verse, he giveth his beloved sleep. I would write it out in big giant lettering, put it in a crinkly, clear cellophane envelope, and stuff it in their pillow, not under their pillow because they'll lose it, but way down to the seam, and then pretend, lay in bed with them and say, okay, when you are afraid tonight, of course you can come to mommy, but why don't you lay here and rub that Bible verse and think that you are beloved, God loves you. And That's beautiful. Not mentioning Satan, not mentioning the other kingdom. We put pictures in one of our son's room with a father praying.
Oh.
Because I would hear this child in the dead of night laughing in his bedroom.
Oh, wow.
There's no toys. We didn't put them to sleep with toys.
Okay.
He's like 2 years old. And I would stand at the door with my hands on. I felt it was demonic, and there was warfare over this child's life. But I didn't go in and disturb him. I just stood there and prayed on the door, and I knew that picture was there, that he could look at that picture.
Wow.
And the Bible doesn't tell us, okay, do this, do that. It's just resist.
Yes.
Resist in James 4:7.
Yes.
Resist and he will flee.
Wow.
And another thing, have you resisted?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, it's amazing the covering responsibility that we're given as parents. And sometimes we don't think of it as I get to be the covering. We can get so bogged down in the emotional heaviness of learning what it means to truly raise a child, learning what it means to really love like Christ. We can say, I have to do this. And I just love this perspective, Michelle, that you're offering about the fact that you are speaking a language that they will understand, rub the verse that I'm giving you. So I'm initiating this as you're covering, but you can engage in this at your age. Or this is way too much for you to embrace mentally. So you know what? I'm going to protect you. I'm going to put my hands on your door because I know what's going on. God has revealed that to me, And it's so important because I think kind of the messier things become in a family, the more opportunity you have to show your kids we still apply God. Because there can be this separation in their thinking. Yes. But isn't God telling me not to do this? And isn't he ashamed of me now or angry with me now? I didn't do the things that you said earlier in our devotional. So I have to hide from God now, Like this is how children think because of the ways that they've interacted with people.
Sure.
And we have to really lift up this example to them. God is different. God actually loves you more than me. I have gone back in a room a number of times after I have disciplined my kids, and I have felt convicted and sensed God maybe not saying something specifically to my heart, but softening it and bringing things to remembrance about the fact that these kids are learning. They don't know it yet. They are learning. And I have gone back in the room and I have said to them, guys, I know I just took this away a little while ago, but God has told me not to do that. He does not want me to teach you that in that way. And so we are going to talk about this again, or I'm going to make sure we talk about this with Daddy. But whatever I just took, God has said, you did this in anger, so it is wrong. And so we're not going to move forward. And you can see sometimes in their face, it's like, wow, thanks, God, you're on our side, and then other times it's like, that's interesting because she just said very clearly, we are not going to do that. And now we are. But, they get to see you figuring out what God is saying to you. And it's so real and it's so transparent and authentic. And you know what? That's what they're going to need on college campuses. That's what they're going to need in the workplace.
Sure.
Okay, God, this isn't too big for you. I can always go in my corner and hear your voice about this topic because you can handle it.
Oh, I love that you're saying that because my next thing I wanted to say was the best parents in the Bible, we don't even know their names and we never see them. All we see is how they prepared their child. And it's Daniel's parents.
Amazing.
He could never have stood in Babylon without being prepared by holy, godly parents. They taught him not to consume the excesses of the world. They taught him to pray, and we can be those parents with an eye on preparing them. I told my boys, I'm disciplining you for the sake of your in-laws' approval, your pastor's approval, and your boss's approval. So sorry for you, but you're going to be prepared.
Wow.
And what's the best thing we can do is put on the whole armor of God from Ephesians 6, right? And I love that. Take the helmet, the shield. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. And I think that Aretta on YouTube mentioned that our enemy is spiritual. So we have to fight a spiritual battle. Spiritual warfare is not fighting the devil. We're an occupying army. You occupy your home. Just stand guard over that territory. So I want to tell you a story.
Oh.
Back in 1971,
Okay.
A gentleman was an air traffic tower controller.
Okay.
And I didn't realize small airports close at night.
Oh.
So there was no traffic in his area. It's like 9 o'clock at night. He's closing. It's a Sunday night. And all of a sudden, a coworker comes and says to him, hey, were you expecting guests? And the guy was like, what? And he sees, oh, there's 2 people from his church that morning that he had invited over to the airport.
Oh.
He had said, come at this time when I close and I'll show you how this all works.
Okay.
So they were there. So he was happy to see his friends from church, and he's showing them this incredible flashlight. And it's huge. It can turn red, green, or white.
Oh, my goodness.
And he put it on. He chose to put it on green, and it sent a beam. It goes through clouds, this incredible flashlight.
Wow.
So he put it on green. He put it in the window, let it flare out. And then I didn't know this. The runway lights are on a rheostat. They can be normal or very intense. So he put them on normal, and then he turned them up to very intense. And they were all like, my gosh, this is incredible. It's like daylight here. Unbeknownst to him, an airplane was in trouble right over their heads in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a kid, a college student who had just gotten his pilot's license. He was flying. He was in school in Texas. His parents were on vacation in Florida. He joined them for the weekend, but he brought his instructor. His parents said, you're not coming alone with a brand new license.
Sure.
So he got his instructor to come and 2 other people. They spent the weekend in Florida, and then they're coming back. And just as he's flying over this airport, he loses all electricity.
Oh, my goodness.
He's got no lights, no communication. He can't see the dashboard. So he and the co-pilot are holding flashlights in their mouths, trying to land this plane. Wow. All of a sudden, they see the green light from this airport, and they're like, oh, my gosh, that's incredible. Somebody saw us. And then they see the runway lights, and they're like, this is great.
Oh.
And they see they're on emergency, so they land. And as soon as they hit the ground, the lights went out. And they were like, well, that was rude. They could have waited. So then they come in to the airport, and the guy said, who gave you permission to land? And the airplane pilot, his name was Franklin Graham.
Oh.
He said, you guys did. Wow. And they were like, oh, my gosh, this is coincidence upon coincidence.
Wow.
After hours, guy shouldn't have even been there.
Yeah.
And his parents, this young guy's parents,
wow.
Billy and Ruth Graham were praying in Florida for him to arrive safely back at his college in Texas.
Wow.
So, after we've put on the armor for ourselves, we have to stand.
Wow.
Stand for our kids, stand for our family, stand for our community.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. And I love how unknown so much was, and it really encourages my faith, Michelle, and I hope it encourages everyone who's listening. There's always going to be an aspect of following God that you truly cannot follow, but that doesn't mean that you should stop following him.
I love it.
There's so much he can see that you can't. There's so much that he will cover that you can't. And even though there's so much about you that wants to love and wants to protect and wants to do this parenting thing or this uncle thing or this aunt thing right, just remember, we always need God's mind, and he's available every day to share more and more of it with us so that we can say, Lord, even in my brokenness and even through all the mess of this family, your name be glorified. Amen.
Well, we just want to remind ladies before we sign off that Connection starts tomorrow morning here in Baltimore. If you want to study the book of Nehemiah, come to NBCNS classroom number 1 at 9:45 a.m. You pay a fee and you get a book, and you can study Nehemiah. If you want to start the following week on Monday night, they're studying Joshua.
Awesome.
So look online for our events, and you'll get more information for both of those.
Yes. And little eyes are watching you as you pursue things like that, Even though their understanding is always growing, they're watching what's important to you. They're watching God in your life, and something in them is going to remember it forever. So thank you guys so much for listening today. We always love sharing with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more. And be sure to join us for the next show where we're going to be discussing spiritual warfare in our walk with God. God bless you all. Have a wonderful week.